their fears, their undying love. What can we learn from the final words of Jesus? As he was led to the cross, where he would hang in unimaginable agony, his last words before giving up his spirit were not of bitterness or defeat, but of forgiveness, redemption, and trust in the one who sent him. Through these words, we will discover the unparalleled depth of Jesus' character, his unwavering commitment to humanity, and his profound love for the lost that he came to seek and save. These are his final moments. These are his famous last words.
Before I get started, I'd like to congratulate you. Yeah, you, I'm talking about you. You made it to the 9 a.m. service on the day of daylight savings time. This service is usually packed. I don't know if you noticed, this is half court of our basketball court right here, and this side is pretty empty compared to usual. So I'm expecting to see them at 11 a.m. today. We'll see if that actually happens or not. We will see. Oh, daylight savings time is always an experience. Today, we are moving on in our famous last words series, and I see, it's not even 9:30 yet. I'm not always up here preaching by now. The service is moving along pretty good. I also have found in this sermon series that it is hard to preach for 35 minutes on one sentence, and so we might just get out of here early today. We will see. Yeah, I know. I didn't figure you'd be upset. This is the gift I give you for waking yourself up for a 9 a.m. service on daylight savings time. Well, before we get to the cross today, I want to tell a little story that I think is a precursor to what we're going to be talking today. It's found in John chapter 2. It's the story of the wedding at Cana. And in the Gospel of John, it is the clear first miracle that Jesus performs. And the story is It's fascinating, but sometimes it's kind of hard to get your head around. It goes like this. Jesus is at a wedding. We're told at the very beginning of the story that it's the third day of the wedding, which is wild, right? The third day of a wedding. This has been some kind of party. And the party has been so good, in fact, that the problem that emerges on the third day is that the wedding has run out of wine. So the party is about dead. And Mary, Jesus' mother, who we have not met in the Gospel of John until now. There is no Bethlehem narrative. There are no shepherds in John. We've met Mary for the first time in the second chapter with Jesus as an adult, not yet announcing himself as a miracle worker, as a Messiah, as a rabbi, as a teacher. He is a guest at a wedding along with his mom. And his mom decides that Jesus can fix the problem. And so, like moms have a want to do, she grabs her son, pulls him aside, and gives him a little lecture about what he is going to do to fix the problem. And Jesus responds in a shocking way. I think it's shocking, at least. He says to her, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Now, in my life, I've longed to be Christ-like, so I tried this technique out with my mom once. Once. I don't recommend it at all for you younger gentlemen. "Woman, why do you involve me?" Well, first of all, I should say, this was not disrespectful talk in the context. This is disrespectful the way we use language. It was not disrespectful in the time. This was normal conversation. "Woman, why do you involve me?" And Mary is not deterred. Jesus says, "My time hasn't come yet," but Mary believes, as mothers are wont to do, that this is their boy's time to shine and they are going to make it happen. And so she starts walking around to all of the people working the wedding and say, "See that guy over there? Listen to whatever he tells you. He's going to fix the problem." Until apparently Jesus, King of heaven, Son of God, feels his arm twisted by his mother enough that he's going to do what she says. And so he demands that some pots get filled with water, that they're brought to him, and he turns these giant pots of water into wine. And the response to the wine that Jesus makes out of nothing but water is, why are we bringing out the best wine at the end? Everyone's already had too much. They can't even taste anything anymore. Why is this the good stuff at the very end of the party? John has this way of writing his stories, his narratives, to have double meanings. Like there's the historical, this actually happened, this is what's going on, this is what Jesus did meaning that John gives us. But almost always there's this underlying, undercutting spiritual meaning as well underneath the historical narrative. There's almost always something else going on in the way that John writes. And here we find, strangely, that this happens on the third day, which is already a hint, a foreshadowing of what might actually also happen on a third day with Jesus. Third day he is risen from the grave. So there's a foreshadowing there. But also this sense that when Jesus shows up, life can be good. You can be enjoying yourself, but yet his presence makes things even more of a celebration. He brings even more of a party. There's more to celebrate when Jesus acts than there ever was before. There's all of this hidden dimension in there. Now, why do I tell this story? Why do I start here? Because today, when we get to the cross, we're going to talk about Jesus speaking to his mother. And he's going to use this strange language of woman again. Not mom, not mommy, not any kind of endearing, familial, close language like we would often think a son and a mother might use with each other, this woman language. And so there's this sense of foreshadowing of this moment as well, that we're introduced to Mary in this way of him saying, woman, why do you involve me? When at the cross, he speaks to his mom again in the Gospel of John, again calls her woman. And when we read biblical stories, they love to make these connections with each other in ways that if we say to ourselves, oh, I've heard this word before, or I've heard this language before in my reading. It's meant to be that way so that we draw these texts together. And so we start the very beginning of the Gospel of John with this story of Jesus' mom being near and intervening, participating in his ministry. And then we end his life in the Gospel of John as well with his mom showing up once again. And his mom showing up at the cross and Jesus conversing with her is going to be our third word that Jesus speaks from the cross today. And so I'm going to invite you, if you would, to stand with me as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today. John chapter 19, just 3 verses, 25 to 27. Starting with verse 25 in John 19. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. That is, I will point out, a lot of Marys in one place. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. John is the disciple whom Jesus loved. He is the author of the book of John. He's the one who writes over and over that he's the one that Jesus loved. Seems unfair, if you ask me. But this is an important thing that John wants you to know, that they are close, they are tight. He is the one that Jesus loved. And the author of this gospel is the only one to author this moment, to bring us into this intimate family story on the cross. John is in some ways offering accountability. He's telling the story saying, this is the work I've been left with. I had better do it. But not just accountability, there's something else that's happening in this story as well that I want to dig into. By the time we get to this moment, Jesus has been on the cross for a little bit. By now, the soldiers have torn his clothes off of him, both his outer garment and his inner garment. The outer garment has been divided into 4 different strips of linen. The inner garment has not been torn at all. The guards have cast lots in order to see who would keep Jesus' clothes after he died. He's been up there for a while. They're playing games and toying with him. So when we get to this moment where Jesus is speaking to John and Mary, Jesus has suffered. He's not dead yet, but dying is coming near. I would imagine words, thoughts, they're hard to come by. And yet, as life is slipping from Jesus hanging on the cross, he looks down upon his buddy and his mom, and he knows that he has a little bit of work left to do. You may have heard this story preached in a few ways in your lifetime in the church. But one of the things that I think pretty strongly is that Jesus is not just taking care of his helpless mom here. Sometimes you hear that preached, oh, how much does Jesus love his mom? That he would make sure that she was taken care of after he died. That could be a hint of what's going on here, but I don't really think so. And part of the reason I don't think so is because Jesus had siblings. James is an author of one of the books of the Bible, and he's understood to be Jesus' brother. There were as many as 4 other brothers. There were as many as 2 sisters, and possibly as many as 7 siblings in total. Jesus is the oldest, most likely the first to die. He had other siblings to take care of Mary. He didn't need a brother to come in and do the work that a child did in Jewish culture. So what I think is happening instead is that Jesus is initiating a new kind of family. A family that isn't defined by blood or birthplace or whose womb you lived in for 9 months. It's not defined by sharing the same grandfather, not defined by coming from the same lineage, not defined by having the same color of skin. Jesus wants us to see that there's a different way of life, a different way of caring for each other, a different way of being a family. So think about it this way, in fact. Jesus was often pretty tough on traditional family structures. If we were to read the Gospels all the way through just with the question of what does Jesus think about the family, you might walk away fairly disappointed with what Jesus thinks about the family. For example, in Matthew chapter 12, this is what he says. He replied to him, "Who is my brother and who are my brother? Or who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Now, if what's number one of importance to you is having a tight nuclear family, this text is bad news. This is scary if your number one goal is to have a tight nuclear family. If, however, you are lonely, if, you are estranged, if, however, you are distant from where your family comes from, this text could be exceptionally good news. If your goal in life is to live safely and nearly to your parents your entire life, this could be a scary text. If your goal, however, is to be a part of God's bigger story, caring for people and being cared for in your time of need, especially when family isn't reliable or nearby, this text is very good news. And so the position from which we sit when we read this text often will likely color whether or not we hear good news or bad news in this text. But I have experienced in my history with the church, I want you to know, I was born into the church, not by good Christian people, but actually by lapsed Christian people who decided that when God was going to bless them with a son, they needed to get back to church. And so my parents started going to church the day I was born. They had not been good Christians up until that point, but they entered into the life of the church. And one of the reasons that has been so meaningful to my story was because I was born into a military family. And when you are a part of a military family, you do not have the good grace of living near your grandparents or your aunts or your uncles. And my dad wasn't paid a whole lot. So the idea of the four of us getting on an airplane and flying across the country to spend time with grandma was never going to happen. And so if I was going to have a family-like experience in my own life, it was going to be because the church accepted my little family as a part of their family. And so while I want you to know I had an incredible relationship with my dad and my mom, right? So on the one hand, I want to read this and say, yeah, but what about my mom and dad? They're great, I love them. But on the other hand, I look at this and I say, the story of my life was so far removed from cousins and grandparents and all, that I received the gift of what this text might mean. That the church, this new kind of family that Jesus is ordaining in his dying breaths on the cross, has been a gift to my life. And it's been a gift to my life in tangible ways. I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to tell you two stories in particular in the way the church has been like a family to me. The first of which was when I was in early middle school, and we transferred from Boston, which is fairly near where my family was from. They were from Massachusetts, and my other grandma lived in New Jersey, to Louisiana. The government made a clerical error on my dad's paycheck and took out more than they were supposed to for housing, but didn't give him any housing whatsoever. So we had no money for anywhere to live. And so every bit of money that would have been used for things like car payment and food went to just make sure that we had a roof over our head. And so we've moved to Louisiana and we have no money. And we've just started attending this church because that's what my parents do. We move to a place, dad is transferred, we look for a church. That's step one. So we go to this church, we have no money, we walk into their lives, and we look like beggars. Our car gets repossessed. We have no way to get there. We have no way to purchase food. And this community starts bringing us food. We would wake up in the morning and there would be baskets of food on our door. A family in the church figured out that they could make it without one of their cars. They had two cars. They became a family of one car so that we could have one until my dad's paycheck got straightened out. This all lasted months, 3, 4, 5 months. I don't remember exactly, but families were giving us cars and food so that we could make it until this clerical error was straightened out. This is what the church did for me. And when I was a young boy, seeing that people I had just met living so sacrificially in the name of the gospel to reach out to a family that probably seemed to them like moochers who fell out of the sky was an incredible testimony of what the church can be to me. Years later, the second story I want to tell you that's a personal testimony is I had just moved to Kansas City from college. I went to Kansas City to go to seminary, grad school. And so I'm living 10 hours away from where my dad is dying. Up until now, he'd been struggling for about a year with cancer, and it was just a 2-hour drive to go and see him. I now live 10 hours away. There was no weekend drives to go see him anymore. And one Saturday morning, in the first semester of school in Kansas City, it was in December, we had lived there about 4 or 5 months at this point, I get a phone call from my mom telling me that dad is going to die this weekend and I need to get back. And we don't have any money. Charisse and Charisse hadn't started teaching yet because she was waiting, or she had started teaching yet, just a couple of months. I was working a part-time job, 2 part-time jobs, and we were barely making it covering our rent in this city far away from our family. And I did not know if I was going to be able to get back in time to see my dad before he died. And so we were getting ready to get in the car and drive and hope that he made it another 10 hours. When someone from our church, where I had started youth pastoring just about 3 months before this, called the pastor and said, "Get him on a plane, I will pay for the ticket." And so someone in a church that I had just moved into paid over $1,000 because of a last-minute ticket to get on a plane so I could go see my dad before he died. This is what a family does for each other when they're drawn to the cross and they hear from Jesus and invite us to be a new kind of family. The stories don't stop there. Those are my stories, but I've seen so many things in my life of people understanding that Jesus calls us to be a new kind of family. I had an associate pastor in Maine, a woman that I loved with all my heart, who felt called to partner with Maine Medical Center, which is the big hospital in the state of Maine, to take in African families who had babies with dangerous heart conditions. And so Maine Medical Center was offering to do the heart surgeries for these 3 babies from Africa, Uganda, to be frank, or to be honest, Uganda. They were going to come to Maine to have pre-op, operation, and post-op done over months if someone would house the families during this time. And my friend took in these families 2 at a time and 1 at another time for months to make sure that their babies could be cared for. I've seen a family whose house was delayed in building. 2-month delay after they had planned on moving out of their old house that they'd sold before they could move into their new house. And I've seen people in the church bring that family into their house so that they weren't caught homeless accidentally for a couple of months. I've seen people in the church pay for bills that other people had. I've seen families in the church give cars to other families. I've seen young men and women taken into their home for indescribable amount of times because they were under hardship or struggling or didn't have a place to go. I've seen men do work on single women's houses that the women either didn't have money or skills to do. I've seen rides given to hospital appointments, to government appointments, to important appointments, to young folks and old folks who couldn't get themselves there on their own. I've seen support given to friends as they were in the hospital, showing up at odd times in the night or strange times during the workday to make sure that they weren't alone. I've seen people draw near to others who had suicide attempts, making sure that they knew after they survived that they were loved and trying to rewrite the story in their own mind. I could go on and on and on about the stories of what I've seen in the church in my life. And for me, it's all drawn out of this moment. Not just this moment, but this moment where Jesus looks down upon his mother who has kids, has a safety net, has a way forward. But he looks down on his buddy as well. And he makes it clear to them that once he's gone, their relationship doesn't end because they are drawn together. They're drawn together by the way in which Jesus gives of his life. They are family now. Woman, you are his mother. John, you are her son. We are a new kind of family. He's showing us how we are to treat each other now that he's departed. Women who did not birth us are our mother. Men who we did not birth are our sons. This is who we are meant to be. Jesus is calling us, inviting us, training us, preparing us to see each other as family and not just people that we go to church with. This is what he means when he says, "Dear woman, here is your son, and here is your mother." You might know someone who needs this kind of love and support in their life. You might know someone who's lonely. You might know someone who's struggling. You might know someone who needs community but doesn't have it. And so we are heading towards Easter. And you may recall last year as we headed into Easter, I gave you a challenge about inviting people to Easter. I want to remind you of what the output of that was. On a typical Sunday at Crossroads, we have somewhere between 400 and 550 people in the building and just under 200 people watching online. That's an average weekend for us. 450 to 550 and another 200 or so online. Last Easter, we had 1,150 people come to Easter service. It is an impactful day. This year, we have plans to tell the stories about how Jesus changes people's lives and changes people's stories. And we're going to have testimonies that day. I hope we have baptisms. It's going to be an impactful day of seeing what Jesus does. The fact that he was crucified and risen in 3 days makes a tangible difference in our lives. That's what we want to show this year. You might know someone that God has placed on your heart, or of your own volition, you have hoped and wanted to invite to church someday. And I want to invite you again to think critically about how you might be involved in inviting people to Easter. We need your help to make that day big. But we want to make it big, not just so we can say, hey, look how great we celebrated it. We want to make it big so that we can make an impact on your children, on your friends, on your neighbors. We want people to experience just how impactful this story of Jesus might be. And so you see this picture here. It is a picture of a banner that we've put up in the gathering place. And so that's upstairs through those windows behind you. If you want to, after the service, you could go up there and get a donut and coffee. That's all free. And there's this banner up on the wall. And what we want you to do over the next few weeks is to write down a name that you think God is calling you to or speaking to you to invite to Easter. And so we want this to be an inspiration to each other. We want it to be a bit of accountability that we've put this name down, so we're going to invite. But we want to be a community of people who are so excited about the story of the gospel that we want to invite other people into this saving relationship with Jesus. And you might think to yourself, I'm not a very good evangelist. Well, that's okay. You don't have to be a good evangelist. You just have to invite people. You see, that's different. You could just say, I want you to come and experience my church with me. We're going to have a celebration on this Sunday. There's also cards up there, like postcard size, that have all the information. So you can take those and just hand it to people. It's got QR codes. It talks about the fact that we're going to have a petting zoo that day. It gives times, hours, location, all of this kind of stuff. And so if you go up there, you could take some of those to hand out as well. But we want that day to be a big celebration, and we want you to be a part of it. So if you would, take it seriously and think critically about who it is you might invite to that day on Easter. And if there's anything I hate about Maryland, it's the weather. But the second thing I hate about Maryland is that spring break is the week of Easter every single year. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to be out of town that week. Well, I've got news for you. You can invite your friends to other Sundays as well. And so if you're going to be out of town for Easter, you can still participate by saying, you know what, I'm going to invite them to the Sunday after, or some Sunday this summer, and say, I want you to think about being an inviter, not just Easter. Easter is the tool, but invitation is the point. And so if there's someone that you think might receive this family well, and it might be meaningful to them, write the name down up there and invite them anyways to whatever Sunday it is they're willing to come, and they can come with you. The band is going to lead us in our final song, and as they lead us in our final song, we're also going to have folks come up with our card of this week's sermon series. If you've been with us the last 2 weeks, you know we've been handing out cards that have a picture of art for the week that it is. And so this week is a picture of two hands holding each other with the words that Jesus says on the cross, "Woman, behold your son, behold your mother." And we're giving these out as reminders, as a collect them all, as a way to take home to remember what mattered to Jesus most in his dying breaths. And so if you're giving one of those cards out, would you come forward? And as we sing this final song, we invite you to stand and come forward and to receive one of these as a gift. Would you stand with me as we sing this final song?